Somebody asked me the other day, Thais, what do you think about the statement, if they wanted to, they will? And I said, well, it depends on somebody's attachment style. Because there's a lot from a neuroscience perspective that's actually happening in the brain of each person's attachment style. And in today's video, we are going to cover the neuroscience of the dismissive avoidant, why they tend to love bomb and then suddenly pull away, and what is actually going on from a fundamental conditioning perspective. Because I think when you understand this, it will shape the way you see everything. And it will also allow you to know how to approach these situations in a much healthier way for yourself, especially if you're fearful avoidant or anxiously attached. And we're going to cover that towards the end. We're going to start today by talking about what love bombing is and what 7 major symptoms are. And then we're going to talk about whether or not the dismissive avoidant is actually love bombing as we go through those 7 symptoms. But then most importantly, we're going to talk about the neuroscience, what's actually happening in the brain of a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And at the end, one of the most important parts is going to be how you should respond, especially if you're anxiously attached and fearful avoidant. And I'll share a quick exercise about insights that you really want to look into to know how you should proceed and deal with this so that you can turn the tables and make it into something healthy, or you can choose whether or not to walk away. Now, if you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Thais Gibson, and after about 14 years of working in both private practice and in our online group coaching programs at the Personal Development School, I am here today to share with you the most powerful insights for deep inner healing from your childhood and past relationships, and how to rewire old painful patterns and toxic cycles so that you can learn to live your best life. So love bombing is essentially when somebody uses intense and overwhelming affection and attention to very quickly hook you emotionally, and usually consciously or subconsciously, as an effort to gain some sort of control rather than to build a healthy relationship. And love bombing is something that generally feels magical at first, but deeply confusing later. Now, we're going to talk about signs of general love bombing, and then I'm actually going to tell you the dismissive avoidance flavor of love bombing. And it is so important to be able to distinguish the two, because on one hand, we're usually talking about literal narcissism. And on another hand, we're talking about something that's happening in a dismissive avoidance brain that can be confusing. So first things first. Usually somebody who's love bombing, they start with extreme intensity very fast. Even if you're anxiously attached, you might feel like, whoa, this is a little bit overwhelming. You may hear things on the first couple of dates like, what if you're my soulmate? You may hear somebody talking about marriage, kids, moving in together within days or a matter of weeks. Perhaps somebody saying something like, I've never felt this way before. I can't believe I finally met my person. And you're generally also going to see constant contact and rapid escalation. So texting all day, wanting calls late into the night, feeling like it's almost a chore, or, something that you have to spend a lot of time and effort to just be on your phone so constantly to respond to this person. You'll also generally see somebody who gives you over the top compliments, puts you on a pedestal in a pretty big way. You may hear things like, you're perfect, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, you're out of my league. And you can tell that this person is idealizing you. And you may feel adored, but generally people who are actually being love bombed, truly love bombed, report feeling like this person doesn't see the real full you. You'll also generally see from a love bombing perspective, big gestures that seem disproportionate, pressure to commit quickly, and intense mirroring, as well as sometimes disrespect of boundaries. Okay, wrapped in romance, like somebody pushing past your limits and calling it passion or excitement. Now, these are major signs, 7 major signs of actual love bombing. Do dismissive avoidants do these things? No. But what people do experience is the juxtaposition of these two things next to each other. So dismissive avoidants, when they first start out, and we're going to get into the neuroscience of it in just a minute, but when they first start dating somebody, they may come on strong. They may be the pursuer. They may really show up and make an effort. They're generally not going to push for commitment really fast, tell you that you're their soulmate, and have this extreme intensity of compliments. They're not going to be texting all day, every day. They're not going to do these grandiose gestures or, try to overwhelm you and disrespect your boundaries in the name of, I just want to spend more time together. You're actually not going to see a lot of those things. But what people do experience, what's so confusing for them, is that somebody comes on strong. They'll pursue, they'll show up honestly as sort of the securely attached version of themselves in the dating stage of a relationship. And so what ends up happening is you see somebody who's open, available, trying, making an effort, showing up. And they give you basically secure signals early on into dating, which cause you to often lower your guard, be excited, allow yourself to be open to being pursued, and generally lead with a certain degree of trust. But then when a dismissive avoidance starts to feel like things are getting real, and especially when the dismissive avoidance starts to feel like it's time to be vulnerable, it's time to progress and move the needle, especially towards things like a commitment to an exclusive relationship, perhaps. These types of situations at a subconscious level start to trigger off their stored fears. So I want to explore what's actually happening now in this particular point, and then we'll get into what you can do and one really shocking fact at the end of this. And just as a side note here, very quickly, I actually have a full free, you get to literally keep it for life, nervous system regulation, somatic processing course that you can keep as a gift fully for free. And it comes with a 7-day free trial to the personal development school. And I'll put the link to that below. It will really help you regulate during this experience so that you can then communicate in healthy ways. So there was a study done by Philip Shaver in 2006 titled Attachment Style Differences in the Ability to Suppress Negative Thoughts. And what this study found at a high level was 3 crucial things. It showed that avoidantly attached individuals, specifically dismissive avoidants, showed greater activation in frontal control regions in the brain when instructed to suppress negative emotion and negative thoughts. And in translation, it essentially means that their brains were better at hitting the emotional kill switch when vulnerability or negative emotions felt too risky. And by comparison, other attachment styles other than securely attached individuals struggled with this significantly more. Now, a second finding from a different study by Helen Fisher showed that early on into dating somebody, dismissive avoidants ride the dopamine and novelty high in relationships. And it was shown that they have intense dopamine and norepinephrine and focused attention in early romantic stages of relationships. However, and my point number 3 is that as real intimacy, reliability, and expectations increase in the relationship, the avoidant brain starts reading closeness as a potential for loss of autonomy or as a potential for future rejection. So those same frontal control circuits then suppress attachment-related thoughts and feelings, creating this classic pattern of overinvesting early, feeling overwhelmed, and then emotionally shutting down and detaching. Now, what does this actually mean for you if you're on the receiving end of this? And can this change for somebody? Are there any ways around this that could become healthy? Well, I think the first thing is to distinguish the difference between a narcissist love bombing and a dismissive avoidant. As I mentioned, dismissive avoidants are going to have not so much what we would classify as love bombing, but they may come on much stronger. The pain where people tend to perceive it as love bombing is the juxtaposition between how strongly somebody comes on and how secure their signals are. And then as soon as they start feeling like things are real, how different they then become and how quickly they retreat, which feels very much and lands very much like a devaluation phase for somebody on the receiving end of it. Going from you're showing up securely, you're trying hard, you're pursuing, you're making an effort to suddenly you dropped off and it feels like the rug got pulled out from underneath me. And in many of those particular cases, somebody will feel tricked or like the wool got pulled over their eyes or even blame themselves for some of that experience, putting themselves down and thinking that they must have done something wrong or that everything is their fault. And if this is you, you have to stop that because literally you see from a neuroscience perspective that that's not what's taking place. So how do you approach this? Well, there are 2 major things that you can do differently. Number 1, when you see something change and you start to see that shift in behavior from a dismissive avoidant, you need to call it out and you need to be aware of what is happening. That's part of why I wanted to share this video here with you today. Because when you know what it is, you don't take it as personally. And in turn, you're able to call it out and set healthy boundaries around it. And when you do say things like, hey, I noticed that things were going really well, and suddenly there's a big shift in this pattern. Here's what I'm looking for going forward. Are you available to show up for that? And that is the place in which you want to communicate your needs. This is the place in which you want to actually share what's happening for you. That is the place from which you want to be communicating from your perspective. You want to be showing up for yourself. And that's a place where you're going to say, hey, I'm needing to have consistency, speak every day perhaps, or see each other once or twice a week. That's what I'm looking for in order to continue spending time together. And what generally happens is that dismissive avoidants from this particular perspective end up looking at this and going, okay, I have an option. I have a choice. I can suddenly cut off everything with this person I like, or I can actually show up for these pretty reasonable requests that they're making. And that's usually the place from which you'll see a dismissive avoidant take a step forward, make an effort. And then it is up to you as a human being to see your needs through and to vet their behavior. Because if somebody's constantly being hot and cold or push and pull or shows up very strongly at the beginning stages, giving you those secure signals, but then suddenly drops off, it is going to be activating for you. And by the way, it is definitely going to be something that causes your nervous system to get dysregulated. But at the end of the day here, you need to be clear about your boundaries, your standards, and your non-negotiables in this relationship. And you need to be clear about how you are needing somebody to show up at a baseline level in order for you to continue investing in this relationship. So I want you to have a long think about what that looks like for you. What are your baseline standards? How often do you want to see somebody each week? How many text messages do you expect each week from the person? That doesn't have to be by many, but like how often do you expect to have exchanges? Is it in the mornings and evenings perhaps? And what are things that you're looking for in terms of emotional availability and effort from somebody? And you need to be talking about those things, saying them out loud, bringing them into the relationship and letting somebody know, and then seeing how they respond. And that will tell you everything you need to know in order to decide whether or not to continue. So I hope this makes a lot of sense for you today. Thank you for watching, for stopping by. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.